Millions of Americans are incarcerated every year. In fact, nearly every citizen has had a relative or loved one sent behind bars at some point in their lives. As our country grows, the population of our prison system grows even faster. The criminal justice system in the United States is incredibly flawed and must undergo reform. One of the most effective ways to start these reforms is to begin with the problem of mass incarceration. The most important issue for the new president and Congress to address in 2017 is reducing the number of people in prison in the United States. What is this mass incarceration, you might ask? Well, over the past 30 years, incarceration rates in America have skyrocketed. We have overcrowded our prisons with inmates and are rapidly running out of space and funding.
Today, there are 2.2 million people behind bars in America, and millions more on parole or probation. Every year, we spend $80 billion in taxpayer dollars to keep people incarcerated. Many are nonviolent offenders serving unnecessarily long sentences.
How can we claim to be the land of the free when we lock up more individuals than any other country in the world? Some of the reasons for this mass incarceration include the war on drugs and mandatory minimum sentencing, excessive punishments for nonviolent crimes, and a private prison system that profits from prisoners. Nearly 30 years ago, the U.S. began what was dubbed the war on drugs. Of the millions of Americans in jail today, half of them were prosecuted for a drug-related felony. This war, through a series of discriminatory laws and practices, has been waged disproportionately on inner cities and people of color.
In 1995, an upswing in the length of sentences that were handed down to inmates for their drug crimes. There's this thing called mandatory minimum, and the judge would have to sentence. He was locked into this sentencing period.
An example of these mandatory minimums includes a rule on crack cocaine, a form of cocaine more commonly found in African American and urban settings. This law offers the same penalty for 5 grams of crack cocaine as powder cocaine does for 500 grams. One of the greatest contributors to mass incarceration is how people are sentenced for crimes in the U.S.
A lot of individuals got incarcerated for long periods of time. I'm talking 15, 20, 25, 30 years for a drug crime. That made it so that, the system isn't flowing. It's sort of backing up.
In 1994, California passed the 3 strikes law, which gave a mandatory life sentence for a third felony conviction, regardless of the crime. Some people have received life sentences for stealing a candy bar. And of course, private prisons. To put it simply, private prisons are prisons run by for-profit companies. This being the case, the main objective of these organizations is not to provide justice or safety, but rather to make money. Many prisoners have been wrongly incarcerated or put away for incredibly harmless crimes for incredibly long periods of time in order to keep these prisons filled. Private prisons, as such, appear to be very biased in their selection of prisoners. In California, for example, nearly 90% of private prison inmates are people of color.
We're way more represented in the prison and jail systems than we are in corporate America.
So that's why mass incarceration is a problem, but what does it mean for everyone else? A total of 2.7 million American children have one or both parents in some federal correctional facility. Most children with incarcerated parents have attention disabilities, and less than 10% graduate college.
The simple answer is, I would say people of color who it's not fair to. It's not fair to people who didn't create the system.
Incarcerating youth is yet another big issue. Not only do these individuals lose their freedom, they lose their basic right to education. Once they are released, these children who have made minor mistakes are forever punished with a liability when it comes to getting into college or finding decent jobs. Housing juveniles in prison costs unnecessary amounts of money that the nation could collectively use towards education and assisting the less fortunate.
We must become the country in the world which invests in jobs and education, not jails and incarceration.
Mass incarceration has a destabilizing effect on our society. In areas where much of the male population is incarcerated, families must deal with the loss of income and parental support. This also leads to urban instability, requiring massive police resources and government spending.
It affects whether you're poor, you're middle income, or high income. It affects every single household, I think, to some degree.
I propose that we put in place more reform programs to help people rather than trapping them in overcrowded jails. Some states have offered to start counseling programs to stop the problems before they even start.
To rid that problem early before it blossoms into what we call a Part 1 crime, or your most serious type of crimes that are across the nation. We've put a lot of people behind bars, but we have not cured the problem.
Mr. President, as the law and order candidate, you ran as someone that was going to be tough on crime. I hope that you see that being tough on crime does not necessarily mean incarcerating more and more people.
As long as there's an intelligent conversation and all the issues are on the table and discussed in a fair, impartial way, there's always going to be progress made.
Our system is broken, and adding more people to it is not the solution. I do not have the solution to this problem, and even if I did, it would not be perfect. Even still, something must be done to solve this impending crisis. You, the leaders of the United States of America, must be responsible. I implore you to focus on this issue, as it affects everyone in this country, not just those serving time. If something is not done soon, an entire generation will be stuck behind bars.
There's a reason good people across the country are coming together to reform our criminal justice system. Because it's not about politics. It's about whether we as a nation live up to our founding ideal of liberty and justice for all. And working together, we can make sure that we do.